Adama was only 5 when her mother died, leaving her in the hands of her father and his second wife, Mama Rucky. At first, Mama Rucky treated her kindly, but as the days turned to months, her true colors began to show. Adama was the first to wake up every morning, sweeping the compound, fetching water, and preparing meals before anyone else stirred. She scrubbed the floors, washed her step-siblings' clothes, and even polished her stepmother's sandals. Yet, no matter how hard she worked, Mama Rucky always found something wrong. "You are as useless as your dead mother," she would say, snapping her fingers in Adama's face. "Next time, wash these plates properly. Or maybe you want to eat from them." Not that Adama ever ate much. She wasn't allowed to touch food until everyone else had eaten. By the time she sat to eat, only scraps remained, bones, half-chewed pieces of yam, and the cold remnants of soup. But Adama never complained. She never cried, never argued. She simply endured. Her father, Baba Cked, had once stood up for her. He had tried to scold Mama Rucky for mistreating his first daughter. But something changed. His voice grew weaker, his anger faded, and soon he became a shadow in his own house. He sat in silence, his eyes vacant, as though a spell had been cast upon him. Then one evening, a strange old man arrived the compound. He carried himself with quiet authority, his piercing eyes scanning the compound before settling on Adama. "Greetings to the people of this household," he announced. His voice was deep, steady. Mama Rucky came out from the house and welcomed him. They had some quiet discussions in low tone. Then she went inside and called her husband. They continued the discussion. Her husband doesn't seem to have much say in the topic being discussed. Then Mama Rucky's eyes gleamed with greed. "Ah, you have come to the right place, Baba," she said, stepping forward. "I have just the child for you. She is hardworking, obedient, just what you need." She grabbed Adama's wrist and pulled her forward. Adama did not resist. She stood still, her dark eyes locked onto the stranger's. "How much will you give me for her?" Mama Rucky asked eagerly. The old man reached into his bag and pulled out a small leather pouch. He placed it in Mama Rucky's hands without even opening it. The woman grinned, her fingers trembling with excitement. "Take her," she said quickly, pushing Adama towards him. The stranger turned to Adama. "Come, child," he said gently. Adama hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, leaving behind the only life she had ever known. As she walked away, she glanced back at her father. For the first time in a long while, his eyes were clear. He was staring at her, his lips trembling as if trying to speak. But before he could say a word, Mama Rucky slammed the door shut. The old man led Adama down the narrow village path, the cool night air brushing against her skin. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. The old man looked down at her, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in a long time, kindness. "To a place where your spirit will no longer be caged," he said. And with that, they disappeared into the night. The journey to the new village was quiet. Adama walked beside the old man, her bare feet brushing against the cool earth. She had no idea where they were going, but she knew one thing. This was a new beginning. They arrived at a compound surrounded by thick, leafy trees. It was a peaceful place, with a small hut at the center and a larger house behind it. A woman stood at the doorway, her arms crossed, watching their approach. She was tall, with dark, smooth skin and kind but sharp eyes. She looked like someone who spoke little but observed everything. "This is her," the old man said simply. The woman stepped forward and studied Adama. Her eyes held neither pity nor cruelty, just quiet understanding. "Welcome, child," she finally said. Adama bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, Ma." The old man nodded and, without another word, turned and walked away, disappearing down the path they had come from. The woman placed a hand on Adama's shoulder and guided her inside. "My name is Mama Ife," she said. "This is your home now." Adama expected to be treated as she had been before, given the hardest chores, scolded for no reason, and fed only when others had eaten. But none of that happened. Mama Ife gave her a clean sleeping mat and warm food. She didn't force her to wake up before dawn to sweep the yard. Instead, she allowed Adama to rise at a normal time and start the day with a simple task: fetching water or stirring the morning porridge. As the days turned into weeks, Adama began to settle in. She learned that Mama Cked was a healer, a woman respected in the village for her knowledge of herbs and remedies. Every morning, they gathered leaves, roots, and flowers, and Mama Cked would teach her their uses. "This one," Mama Cked said, holding up a small green leaf, "can stop a fever if boiled into tea. And this," she pointed to a cluster of red berries, "is dangerous if eaten, but can be used in tiny amounts to cure a stubborn cough." Adama listened carefully, memorizing every detail. She also learned how to cook different meals, some she had never even heard of before: spiced yam porridge, rich peanut soup, and soft, fluffy pounded yam. Mama Cked insisted on perfection. If Adama made a mistake, she corrected her firmly, but never in anger. "You must be patient with yourself," Mama Cked told her once. "A strong woman is not only skilled but also wise." Adama was allowed to have friends, something she had never experienced before. The other children in the village welcomed her easily. They played in the evenings, chased fireflies, and sang under the moonlight. But Mama Cked was always watchful. She let Adama be free, but not careless. If she stayed out too late, there were consequences. If she was disrespectful, even by accident, she was corrected. Years passed. Adama no longer thought of herself as a girl who had been sold. She was simply Adama, the girl who was learning, growing, and becoming someone she did not yet understand. Yet, beneath Mama Cked's kindness and strictness, there was something else. A purpose. It was as if she was training Adama for something she never spoke of. And soon Adama would find out what it was. The seasons changed, and Adama grew into a strong young woman. Her hands became skilled at grinding herbs, mixing remedies, and cooking meals that filled the house with rich aromas. She had learned to read the sky, to know when the rains would come, and to listen to the whispers of the wind. But one question lingered in her mind, untouched like an old wound. Why was she brought here? Mama Cked had given her everything, yet she had never once explained why she had been taken from her old life and given this new one. One evening, as they sat outside under the sheer tree, sipping warm millet porridge, Adama decided it was time. The moon was high, casting silver light across the compound. The moment felt right. "Mama Cked," she said, keeping her voice light, "I have been here for many years now. You have taught me much, and I am grateful. But," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "Why did you buy me?" Mama Cked didn't flinch. She continued sipping her porridge as if she hadn't heard. Then, after a long silence, she set her cup down and turned to Adama. "There are quite a few reasons why you were selected," she said calmly. "But I will only tell you how you were qualified to be chosen." Adama held her breath. "You endured suffering with grace," Mama Cked continued. "You were mistreated, yet you did not become bitter. You were denied food, yet you did not steal. You were insulted, yet you did not raise your voice. That kind of strength is rare, Adama. It is the strength of a leader." "A leader?" Adama asked, frowning. Mama Cked nodded. "But the purpose of your selection will be made known to you in due time. You must not ask me about it again." The finality in her voice made it clear that the conversation was over. Adama looked down at her hands, feeling a mixture of emotions: pride, confusion, and a hint of fear. A leader? Of what? That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Mama Cked had always been kind yet firm, always guiding her, shaping her. But for what? As sleep finally took her, one thought echoed in her mind. Whatever it was, she would be ready. The air was thick with the scent of roasted groundnuts and fresh palm oil as Adama walked back from the market. Her basket balanced effortlessly on her head. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the dusty path. As she approached the compound, she heard voices, Mama Cked's and a man's, low and serious. "It will be in 3 weeks' time," the man said. Adama paused for a heartbeat before stepping forward, pretending she had heard nothing. As she entered, her eyes widened in surprise. It was him, the man who had brought her here all those years ago. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Without him, she might still be a mistreated girl, scrubbing floors and eating scraps. She smiled warmly and greeted him with deep respect. "Ah, you have grown well, Adama," the the man said, nodding approvingly. Mama Ife, her expression unreadable, turned to her. Go and prepare a meal quickly. Our guest must eat before he leaves. Adama obeyed at once, her hands moving skillfully as she prepared a rich stew of egusi and pounded yam, garnished with tender goat meat. When the food was ready, they ate together in comfortable silence, though questions burned inside Adama. By the time the man left in the evening, she was still waiting for Mama Ife to explain why he had come. But she didn't ask. She had learned patience. 5 days passed. Then one afternoon, Mama Ife called her to sit beside her under the shade of the old sheer tree. You have once again shown a virtue worthy of your destiny, she said in a calm voice. You did not ask me why he came. You waited. Adama listened intently. The reason you were selected, Mama Ife continued, was to be groomed as a wife for one of the princes of our land. Adama's breath caught in her throat. This process is an age-old tradition, Mama Ife explained. Our kings and princes do not simply marry for beauty or status. They marry women of strength, wisdom, and virtue. You are one of 10 girls chosen for this honor. In 1 week, you will go to the palace where you will be tested. Only one will be chosen. Adama's mind swirled with emotions. All these years of training, of discipline, of learning, it had all been leading to this moment. I will not fail you, Mama Ife, she said, determination in her voice. Mama Ife placed a hand on her shoulder. Do not think of it as a test to pass. Think of it as a path to walk. If it is yours, it will come to you. On the appointed day, the man returned. He stood at the entrance, waiting. Mama Ife wrapped a delicate shawl around Adama's shoulders and placed a small charm in her palm. This will remind you of where you came from, she said, and that no matter what happens, you are worthy. Adama nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She stepped forward and followed the man. The journey to the palace was long, but Adama remained composed. When they arrived, the grand gates opened before them, revealing towering walls and lush gardens. The man who had brought her here turned to her. Go and wait under the mango tree with the others, he said. Adama nodded and walked toward the tree where a group of young women already sat. Some of them whispered among themselves, their eyes darting toward her as she approached. She greeted them warmly, introducing herself, but she could sense their guardedness. Unlike her, many of them had been preparing for this moment for years. Some had been sent by their families with the hope of securing power through marriage. To them, Adama was an outsider, a latecomer to the process. Hours passed. The sun rose high, then began to dip toward the horizon. Still, no one came for them. At first, they waited patiently, but as time dragged on, frustration set in. This is ridiculous, one of the girls, Sua, muttered. How can they leave us here like this? This is a test, another girl, Duni, replied knowingly. They want to see who has patience and who does not. Adama remained silent. She had been through worse in her life. Sitting under a tree for hours was nothing compared to what she had endured in Mama Rucky's house. When the sun was nearly gone, palace servants finally appeared and led them to their quarters. That night, they were informed of their first task, cooking for the royal family. Each girl took turns preparing meals. Adama's food stood out. Every dish she made was rich with flavor, carefully balanced, and perfectly seasoned. Word spread quickly about the mystery cook. One evening, after the king tasted a particularly delicious dish, he nodded in approval. Who made this meal? He asked. Before Adama could speak, another girl, Tenny, stepped forward. I did, my king, she said with a sweet smile. Adama's heart skipped a beat, but she said nothing. She simply bowed and stepped back. Meanwhile, the palace servants moved quietly, attending to their duties. Unknown to Adama and the others, some of these servants were not what they seemed. Among them were 2 princesses and their cousin, all secretly observing the contenders. But the biggest secret of all was the prince himself, disguised as a lowly servant. Many of the girls ignored the palace workers, speaking to them only when necessary. Some were outright rude. But Adama? She treated them all with kindness. One day, as they prepared to serve the evening meal, a servant, the prince, accidentally knocked over a freshly plated dish meant for the king. The room fell silent. You fool, one of the girls hissed. Do you know what you've done? He's finished, another murmured. They'll throw him out for sure. Adama, however, remained calm. There's no need for panic, she said firmly. If we report this, he might be punished or even lose his place here. That helps no one. She took the remaining portions left in the pot which was meant for her and the servants. combined and arranged them beautifully before handing them over to be served. Later that night, she found the servant and placed a small bowl of food in his hands. "You must be more careful," she said gently. "But mistakes happen. Just learn from them." The servant, who was really the prince, looked at her with astonishment. No one had ever spoken to him like that. His sisters and cousin, who had been watching from afar, exchanged glances. They were beginning to see who Adama truly was. As the days passed, the competition became more intense. One by one, the other girls began to disappear. There was no grand announcement, no warning. They were simply called away in the night, never to return. Adama knew her time was coming. She just didn't know whether she would be sent home or be chosen as the prince's bride. But whatever happened, she would face it with the same strength she always had. 3 weeks had passed since the selection process began, twice the length they had been told. Now only 4 girls remained: Adama, the 2 princesses, and their cousin. Yet Adama had no idea that she was the only true contender left. Each day, she continued preparing meals, unaware that the eyes of the royal family were always on her. One morning, as the king settled to eat breakfast, he suddenly called out, "Adama, come and join us at the table." Adama hesitated, unsure if she had heard correctly. Royals did not eat with commoners. She glanced at the princesses, who grinned at her. One of them playfully nudged her forward. Before she could react, the other girls also took seats at the table, along with the servant she had defended. Adama's confusion deepened. Something was off. She had grown up knowing her place. Yet here they all were, eating together as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The others were too comfortable, too confident. She remained calm but could not hide the puzzled look in her eyes. As they finished their meal, the king finally spoke. "Adama, introduce yourself." Adama straightened, suddenly feeling like a small girl again. "My name is Adama, daughter of Omoli, from the village of S0LD." The king nodded approvingly. Then, to her surprise, the girls sitting beside her spoke up. "I am Princess S0LD," the first girl said with a smile. "I am Princess Yawanda," the second added. "And I am their cousin, Adenike." Adama's heart pounded. Princesses? Adenike, a royal cousin? And then the so-called servant, the one she had scolded in private for spilling the king's food, stood up. "And I," he said with a knowing smile, "am Prince S0LD, heir to the throne." Adama's breath caught in her throat. The prince, the very man she had unknowingly been chosen for. The king's deep voice cut through the stunned silence. "Adama, you have passed every test. Not just in skill, but in character. You have shown patience, kindness, humility, and strength." He leaned forward. "Now the final decision is yours. Would you like to take time to know S0LD? To see if together you could build a future?" Adama's lips parted slightly. Her heart pounded, but she already knew the answer. She turned to the prince, who looked at her with warmth and admiration, not as a prize to be won, but as an equal. She bowed her head slightly and said with quiet certainty, "Yes, my king. I would be honored to know him better." The king smiled, and the queen nodded in approval. "Then from this day forward, you have our blessing to court. May this be the beginning of something great." The room erupted into quiet excitement. The princesses beamed, and Prince S0LD chuckled softly, his eyes filled with unspoken promises. Adama had stepped into the unknown when she was taken from her home. But now she realized this was always her destiny.